I met Danielle at a friend's backyard barbecue in the middle of June. She showed up halfway through the afternoon, carrying a bottle of wine she admitted she didn't even like, with her sunglasses still on and this easy, natural energy that kind of just pulled people in. She made everyone laugh without really trying. I remember watching her from across the yard and thinking, she already knows everyone here, doesn't she? She didn't. That was just how she was. We ended up next to each other at the food table, both pretending to be deeply interested in the potato salad. The conversation just took off from there. We talked through most of the afternoon about travel, food, music, teaching. She was in her third year of elementary school, and tech. I just started at a mid-sized logistics software firm. It felt like we'd known each other longer than a few hours. At the end of the night, she asked me if I wanted her number before I could even work up the nerve to ask. That's how it started. Our first few dates were simple but perfect. A tiny Cuban restaurant with live music. A bookstore where we picked out a novel to read together. Long walks through neighborhoods we didn't live in, making up stories about the people in the houses we passed. Nothing extravagant, just easy. Natural. Like we were slipping into something familiar. 2 years later, we got married in the fall under a big oak tree at a vineyard outside the city. Small wedding, close friends and family. It rained in the morning, but the sky cleared just in time for the ceremony. I remember her laughing during her vows because she lost her place in the paper she was reading from. I remember thinking, this is the person I want to come home to for the rest of my life. We bought our first house about a year after that. 3 bedrooms, a little backyard, and just enough projects to keep me busy on the weekends. She made it feel like home faster than I ever could have imagined. Painted the kitchen that perfect shade of green she'd been obsessed with, planted wildflowers along the fence, hung pictures before we'd even unpacked half the boxes. Life with Danielle had a rhythm to it. She was the morning person. I was more functional after coffee. She'd hum while cooking, and I'd tease her for singing off-key. She'd leave post-it notes on the bathroom mirror if she left before I woke up. I'd surprise her with takeout when she had a long day. It was balanced. It was warm. We weren't flashy, but we worked. We traveled a bit when we could, weekend trips to the mountains, a beach vacation every couple of years. She always said her favorite moments were the quiet ones. Sitting on the porch with a book, lying on the couch with our feet tangled under a blanket, falling asleep halfway through a movie she insisted we had to watch. I loved that about her. She didn't need big moments. She made small ones feel meaningful. That's who we were. At least, that's who I believed we were. Life with Danielle settled into a rhythm faster than I expected. I used to hear people say marriage changes everything, but for us, it felt more like a continuation. Like we just put a name to what we already had. We still had lazy Sundays, inside jokes about our neighbors, dinner arguments over whether cilantro tasted like soap. I say yes, she says no, and those quiet evenings where neither of us needed to say much. It was comfortable, but in a good way. Not boring. Not stagnant. Just grounded. Our schedules were different, which oddly worked to our advantage. She was out the door before 7 most mornings, always with a thermos of tea and her teaching shoes that she'd keep at the front door. I didn't start work until later, so I'd usually be the one tidying up, making the bed, starting the laundry. It wasn't something we talked about, it just happened that way. I'd usually get home first, and by the time she walked in, her face would relax in that way it only did at home. We'd eat. We'd talk about our days. Sometimes we'd walk to the corner store just because it felt nice to move together. It wasn't a highlight reel kind of life, but I honestly loved it. We'd been married about 2 years when Danielle brought up having kids again. It wasn't a surprise. She'd always been open about wanting a family, but the conversation came gently. She asked how I felt about maybe thinking about trying soon. I remember we were sitting on the porch, both holding iced drinks, her legs curled under her in one of my hoodies. I told her I was ready. I meant it. It didn't take long. A few months later, we were sitting in a small bathroom with the world's cheapest pregnancy test balanced on the edge of the sink. She laughed before the result even came in, said she had a feeling. I did too, if I'm honest. She just glowed differently. The pregnancy was a mix of excitement, nerves, and way too many late-night snack runs. Danielle took to it like she was made for it, reading books, joining online forums, talking to the baby before bed. I was more the practical type, installing car seats, reading reviews on baby monitors, pretending not to cry when we built the crib. The night we painted the nursery, she put music on and danced around with a roller in her hand. I told her she looked ridiculous. She told me I was old. We laughed about that for days. Our son was born in early spring. We named him Caleb. He was small and wrinkly and screamed like he was auditioning for something. But he also had Danielle's exact eyes. And when he finally looked up at me that first night in the hospital, I felt something shift. I didn't expect it. That instant connection people talk about, it hit me hard. I was someone's dad. We were parents. Those early months were blurry and hard and beautiful all at once. We were tired, constantly covered in spit up, and barely sleeping in shifts, but somehow it brought us closer. We learned how to rely on each other in new ways. Danielle was incredible with him. Natural, patient, present. She made motherhood look effortless, even when I knew it wasn't. When Caleb smiled for the first time, she cried. I did too, though I blamed it on allergies. Looking back now, those years felt solid. Like we were on track, like the life we'd talked about in quiet moments had come into focus. There were hard days, sure. What new parents don't have them? But there was love in the middle of it. Real, daily, ordinary love. The kind that builds something. If someone had paused my life during those years and asked me if I was happy, I would have said yes. No hesitation. And I wouldn't have been lying. Caleb's first few years were everything people say about parenting, and then some. Chaotic, exhausting, full of small victories and quiet, almost sacred moments. He was an easy baby in some ways, and a stubborn one in others. He didn't sleep through the night until he was almost 1, which meant Danielle and I spent a lot of evenings shuffling down the hall like zombies, trading off rocking shifts and whispering half-asleep jokes just to keep each other awake. We laughed through it more than we fought, which I think says a lot. Danielle seemed to thrive in that early chaos. She had this energy when it came to being a mom, a calm confidence I honestly admired. She wasn't overbearing or anxious, just steady. She knew when to intervene and when to let Caleb figure things out. She read parenting books and joined a local mom group that she swore she only went to for the coffee, though I know she liked having that space. I didn't mind. I liked seeing her happy, seeing her find her place in this new chapter. I did what I could to support her, to be the kind of partner I always promised I'd be. I'd get up early with Caleb on Saturdays so she could sleep in. I took over cooking most nights so she could focus on grading papers or just unwind. We didn't have some perfect split of responsibilities, but it worked for us. We talked through things, even when we were tired. And when we argued, which wasn't often, it was never cruel. We still respected each other, still reached for each other after a hard day. Those small things meant everything. I remember one night, it must have been a year or so after Caleb was born, when we were both sitting on the back steps with a monitor buzzing faintly beside us. It was quiet outside, warm enough to sit in short sleeves, and we were just talking. Nothing important. Just laughing about something stupid Caleb had done. He was obsessed with putting toy cars in the fridge at the time. At one point, she leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "This feels good. Like, real good. Doesn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, this is it, right?" She smiled and said, "Yeah, this is it." And I believed it. We were the couple with the slightly too organized garage, the monthly taco night with friends, the annual trip to her parents' lake house where we argued about who made the better bonfire. I kept a spreadsheet for our budget. She made playlists for road trips. We had our patterns, our rhythm. Looking back now, I can see how easy it was to settle into that life, to trust in the comfort of routine. There wasn't anything flashy about it, but it was ours, and I was proud of it. I wasn't waiting for something to change. I didn't know I should be. When Danielle told me she was pregnant again, it felt different from the first time. Not in a bad way, just quieter, less explosive, less surprise. This time, there were no tears of disbelief, no frantic hugging on the bathroom floor. Just a soft moment at the kitchen table. A gentle, tired smile. A test slid across the counter between sips of coffee. "We're doing this again," she said. And we were. By then, Caleb was nearly 4. He was in that fiercely independent stage, loud, curious, always asking why. He'd recently decided he was going to be a big helper, which meant he tried to fold towels and carry groceries and put his own socks on, even when he got them twisted halfway up his legs. The idea of giving him a sibling just felt right. Like the next part of the story we were writing. Danielle's second pregnancy was tougher than the first. She was more tired, more nauseous, more emotionally up and down. I chalked it up to age or stress, or maybe just the simple fact that parenting while pregnant is a whole different challenge than the first go-around. Still, she handled it with grace, mostly. She kept teaching full-time until her 7th month and didn't complain much, at least not to me. We didn't find out the gender this time. She said she wanted to be surprised. I liked the idea too, even though part of me hoped for a girl. Someone who might soften the chaos of our all-boy household. Someone who might end up with her mom's eyes. We had our second child, a girl, on a cloudy afternoon in late March. Danielle was incredible. Focused. Strong. I'll never forget the way she looked at our daughter when they placed her on her chest. There was something in her face I couldn't read. Joy, yes, but layered with something else. Not sadness, exactly. More like weight. Like the moment carried more than just the baby in her arms. We named her Lila. The first few weeks were a blur again, but it felt different this time. Danielle seemed more protective. She held Lila closer. She hesitated to let even me take over for long. She brushed it off as typical mom stuff, and maybe it was. But sometimes I'd catch her staring off while rocking Lila, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I didn't think much of it. Sleep deprivation messes with you. Parenthood stretches you in weird, invisible ways. Still, little things started to shift. She was on her phone more often, even during the night feeds. Not just scrolling, texting. She'd angle the screen away when I walked by. I didn't press her on it. She said it was her mom, or a teacher friend with a newborn. I had no reason not to believe her. But I noticed it. Caleb, meanwhile, was adjusting to being a big brother in his own clumsy way. He'd try to sing to Lila, bring her toys, ask a million questions about how babies work. Danielle praised him endlessly for it, and I could see how much she loved watching them together. Our family was growing, becoming what we always talked about. A house full of noise and small footsteps and diaper bags and sticky counters and love. But sometimes, late at night, when I rolled over in bed and saw Danielle illuminated by her phone screen, her face lit up in that soft blue glow, I'd feel something I couldn't name. Not suspicion. Not fear. Just distance. The same woman who used to curl into my side without thinking now faced the other way more often than not. It wasn't anything serious. It wasn't anything at all. At least, that's what I told myself. Life didn't fall apart all at once. If anything, it kept moving in the same direction it always had: daycare drop-offs, early morning meetings, grocery runs, diaper changes, school emails. The structure was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. It started small. Danielle would come to bed later than usual. At first, I thought it was just the baby again. Lila was never the best sleeper, and I figured Danielle was taking the night feeds so I could rest before work. But then there were nights when Lila was fast asleep, and Danielle was still downstairs. I'd hear the soft murmur of her voice through the floor, laughing sometimes, whispering other times. When I asked who she was talking to, she always said her sister, or one of her teacher friends. People I knew. People I trusted. And I did trust her. But I don't know. The explanations felt a little too easy. She was tired all the time, but not in the way she was with Caleb. Back then, she would crash on the couch next to me, drape her legs over mine, and doze off halfway through whatever we were watching. Now, she stayed on her phone more. Always texting. Or scrolling, but with this intense focus like she was reading something more personal than headlines or memes. One night, I caught a glimpse of a name on her screen, just a flash before she swiped it away. Ryan. It didn't mean anything. Could have been anyone. A coworker. A parent from school. Still, I noticed how fast she turned the screen over after that. She never used to hide her phone. She started going out more, too. Said she needed breaks from the baby, needed to feel like a person again. I didn't argue. I got it. Parenting is relentless. And she'd more than earned a night out with her friends. But it started becoming more frequent. A book club that met twice a month became every week. Drinks after work turned into hours away with vague explanations. I'd ask how it went, and she'd tell me it was fine. Just the usual. No detail. No color. Just enough to move the conversation along. I tried not to overthink it. I reminded myself that life with 2 kids is overwhelming. That we were both stretched thin. That maybe I was just being sensitive. Maybe I was just tired. But there were moments, fleeting, quiet ones, when I'd look at her and feel like I was seeing a version of Danielle I didn't quite recognize. Not unkind. Not distant, exactly. Just elsewhere. Like part of her had already detached. She was present, but not with me. One night, I walked into the kitchen and saw her smile at her phone, this soft, real smile I hadn't seen in a while. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she quickly locked the screen and went back to stirring Lila's bottle like nothing had happened. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, wondering when the last time was that she smiled at me like that. It's hard to explain these feelings without sounding paranoid. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't trying to catch her doing anything. I just started noticing things that didn't feel like they belonged in the life we'd built. She was happy, or at least she seemed lighter in those moments I wasn't part of. And I didn't know what to do with that. If you'd walked into our house during that time, you probably wouldn't have noticed anything was wrong. The toys were still scattered across the living room. The kitchen always smelled like whatever Danielle had baked that week, and the family calendar on the fridge was still filled with school events, dentist appointments, and color-coded notes about who was picking up who. It all looked exactly like it should, a functioning, busy household. A normal life. But from the inside, things felt hollow. Like someone had pressed mute on a soundtrack I hadn't realized was there all along. Danielle had started going to bed after me most nights. It was always the same explanation: grading papers, folding laundry, answering emails. I didn't question it. Not out loud, anyway. I told myself it was just a phase, that things were chaotic with 2 kids, and maybe we were just falling into that routine all couples warned us about, the one where your marriage becomes a co-parenting arrangement and not much more. But that didn't explain the way she avoided eye contact when she walked in late from book club, or how she never offered details about who was there or what they'd talked about unless I asked. And even then, the answers were thin, like placeholders meant to satisfy curiosity but not really invite a conversation. One evening, I came home from work a little earlier than usual. The house was quiet except for Caleb watching cartoons in the living room and Danielle in the dining room with her laptop open. Her phone was beside her, and I caught the end of what looked like a long message thread before she tilted the screen slightly away. She smiled when she saw me and closed the laptop. "Didn't expect you home so soon," she said. Her tone was warm enough, but her body language was tight, like someone caught in the middle of a thought they weren't ready to share. I asked what she was working on. She told me it was lesson planning. I nodded, but the screen hadn't looked like lesson plans. It had looked more like a chat window. Again, I said nothing. What was I going to say? "I saw you texting, and you looked happy, so now I'm spiraling?" That kind of insecurity felt embarrassing, especially without proof. And even more so because I still wanted to believe in her. In us. But these little cracks, her laughter at texts she didn't explain, the sudden moments where she'd go still and distant when she thought I wasn't looking, her shifting the phone just out of view during dinner, they started building on top of each other. A slow, invisible weight. The other thing I noticed was how she changed around the kids. She was still a great mom, attentive, loving, patient, but she was different with them than she was with me. With Caleb and Lila, she was open, soft. But with me, she felt guarded. She never used to flinch when I reached for her hand. She never used to hesitate when I kissed her cheek in passing. Now she did. Subtle stuff. Just enough to make me feel like maybe she wasn't trying to push me away, but wasn't exactly pulling me closer either. I started staying later at work, even when I didn't have to. I told myself it was to catch up on projects, but I think part of me just wanted space. Being home didn't feel the same. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't cold. It was just off. Like I'd become an extra in my own life. The guy who took out the trash, helped with homework, refilled the gas tank. Necessary, but not needed. Present, but not really part of the story anymore. And maybe it was just stress. Maybe we both needed a reset. I kept thinking that, hoping it. But a thought had started to creep in, the kind you don't say out loud because even hearing it makes you feel disloyal to the person you promised to trust. What if she's hiding something? I don't think there was a single moment that made me do it. No loud argument, no scandalous slip-up. Just the slow, steady pull of doubt that had been settling in my chest for months. It didn't even feel like a decision when I made it. It felt like something I was quietly pulled toward, the same way you double-check that you locked the door even though you already know you did. Just to be sure. Just to quiet that tiny voice. I remember sitting in the car one evening after picking Caleb up from school. He was in the back seat, talking about how he wanted to be a zookeeper or a firefighter, maybe both. His voice was full of that open, wide-eyed wonder kids have, where the world still feels full of doors waiting to be opened. I looked at him in the rearview mirror and smiled. And then, without warning, the question hit me again. The one I'd been trying to push away every time it surfaced. Do I really know this is mine? It felt cruel even thinking it. Caleb was my son. I loved him. We built train tracks together on rainy weekends. He used to fall asleep on my chest when he was a baby, his tiny fingers wrapped around my shirt collar. I was there for the teething, the tantrums, the first scraped knee, the first day of school. I knew what made him laugh, what foods he hated, which bedtime stories he asked for on repeat. He was mine in every way that counted. Except, maybe, in the one way I couldn't prove. And that thought was eating me alive. I didn't tell Danielle. Of course I didn't. This wasn't something I could bring up without detonating everything. And maybe that's why I hesitated for so long. Because part of me was scared that if I asked the question out loud, the answer might come screaming back at me. But another part of me, the quieter, persistent part, was just tired of wondering. So I ordered the test online. A discreet kit. No label that would raise suspicion. I waited until I had the house to myself, Danielle out with her mom, the kids at a sleepover, and took the samples. It was terrifying how easy it was. A few swabs, a couple sealed envelopes, and that was it. The instructions said it would take a couple of weeks. I didn't tell a soul. For the next few days, I carried that secret around like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Danielle would laugh at something on her phone and show me a meme, and I'd smile like everything was normal. I'd help Caleb with his spelling words, rock Lila to sleep when she had nightmares, and all the while I was thinking, what if I'm not their dad? What if none of this was ever real? But then the guilt would hit me, just as hard. Who was I to question this life? These kids? Danielle, despite the distance, was still the same woman I married in so many ways. Still kind, still funny when she let her guard down. Still the person I shared a home and a history with. Maybe I was the one who had changed. Maybe I was just looking for something to blame for the silence that had crept into our marriage. But the test was already out there. Mailed. Processed. On its way back. And even though I told myself I wasn't expecting anything, just peace of mind, I knew deep down that part of me was waiting for the world to split open. The envelope was thinner than I expected. Just a plain white envelope. No bold letters, no official stamp. You'd never guess it held something capable of ripping your life clean in two. I stood in the kitchen with it in my hand for what must have been 20 minutes, just staring at it. Danielle was upstairs giving the kids a bath. I could hear the splash of water, Lila's giggle, Caleb's voice asking for more bubbles. It sounded like any normal night in any normal house. And I was holding a loaded weapon. I opened it slowly, like somehow easing into it might soften the blow. There were 2 sheets of paper. One for Caleb, one for Lila. I read the first line of each, and I didn't need to read anything else. Probability of paternity, 0%. I remember staring at those numbers, rereading them over and over, like they might change if I just looked long enough. Like maybe I'd missed a decimal or misunderstood what I was seeing. But it was right there. Clinical. Cold. Clear. I sat down hard at the kitchen table and just stared at the wall. I wasn't even thinking. My mind had gone completely blank. I could still hear Danielle upstairs, talking to the kids, using that soft voice she always saved for bedtime. The kind of voice that used to make me love her more than anything. And now it felt like nails on glass. I thought I'd feel rage, or at least something sharp and loud. But in that moment, all I felt was stillness. A kind of stunned silence that settled into my bones and made everything else feel far away. Caleb wasn't mine. Lila wasn't mine. And she'd known. She had to have known. That meant this had been going on for a long time. Years. At least 10. Maybe more. The timeline slammed into my head like a freight train. This wasn't a one-night mistake. This wasn't a brief, regrettable lapse in judgment. This was a double life. An entire decade of lying to my face. Of building a family with me on the outside of it without ever giving me the truth. The first thing I thought of was Caleb's first steps. The way I caught it on video, how I'd shown it to my parents like it was the proudest moment of my life. I remembered Lila's first birthday party, how Danielle cried during the cake, said she was just emotional. I remembered the family trips, the bedtime stories, the hours of work and patience and love I had poured into these children. And now, what? I was just some guy who lived in the house? I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I knew if I opened my mouth, something inside me would break in a way I couldn't take back. So I waited. I tucked the papers back into the envelope, placed it inside my desk drawer in the garage, and locked it. Then I walked upstairs like nothing had happened. I kissed Caleb on the forehead. I tucked Lila into bed. I smiled at Danielle when she came out of the bathroom, brushing her hair back and yawning. She smiled back. Like everything was fine. Like she hadn't rewritten my entire life behind my back. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the words 0% repeating over and over in my mind. Not because I didn't believe them, but because now I did. I waited 2 more days. Not because I was unsure, or because I needed more time to think. I didn't. The truth was clear. Unforgiving. But I needed those days to prepare myself. Emotionally, practically, everything. I needed the house quiet and calm when it happened. I needed to know that when I said what I had to say, it would land like a hammer with no room for interpretation. No argument. No crawling back. Danielle was in the kitchen when I finally told her. It was late Saturday morning. The kids were at my parents' for the weekend, something I arranged quietly, without telling her why. She was making coffee, humming something under her breath, barefoot in the kitchen, like it was just another weekend. Like she hadn't detonated our life and sat quietly in the rubble for a decade pretending not to smell the smoke. I walked in, held the envelope in my hand. My fingers didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I handed it to her and said, calmly, "You need to read this." She looked at it like it was junk mail. Then her eyes scanned the first page. I watched the blood drain from her face. She blinked, once, twice, her lips parting like she wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked up at me and tried to smile. "What is this?" she said, like she thought maybe I'd tell her it was a joke. That there was some misunderstanding. "I had the kids tested," I said. "They're not mine. Not Caleb. Not Lila." She froze. The silence between us stretched out, thick and choking. She didn't deny it. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry, not yet. Instead, she looked away from me and said nothing. And that was all I needed. That silence told me everything she hadn't said for years. "You don't live here anymore," I said. "Your stuff's already packed. It's in the garage. You and the kids, you're leaving today." Her voice cracked. "You're kicking out your own children?" "They're not my children," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You made sure of that." She stepped forward, tears finally forming. "They don't know. They love you. You're their dad." "I'm not," I said. "You made that choice for me a long time ago. Don't come to me now and ask me to carry it." Then she collapsed into pleading. Tears, hands outstretched, apologies that meant nothing because they came a decade too late. She started saying things like, "It didn't mean anything," and "It was a mistake," and "I didn't know how to tell you." I just stared at her. Calm. Detached. Let her run in circles while I stood still. "You had 10 years," I said. "You could have told me 100 times. But you let me raise them. You let me love them like they were mine while you lived a lie. You chose this." She started to move toward me, like she wanted to touch my arm or plead again, and I took a step back. I told her, clearly, "Get out." That's when I pulled out my phone and hit send. It was a short video. Just a few seconds. Enough. Danielle's face changed when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, opened the message, and the color drained from her face again. Her lips parted, then trembled. She watched it in silence. It was me and her sister. She stared at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. "You, what the hell is wrong with you?" I shrugged. "Now we're even." Her voice rose then, full of disbelief and fury. She called me disgusting, a monster, said I'd scar her forever. But I just turned and walked away, left her standing there in the kitchen where we used to drink coffee and plan our lives. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even look back. She called me later that night, and the night after. Texted. Emailed. Voice messages filled with apologies, explanations, emotional spirals, manipulations wrapped in sorrow. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to see every moment of silence. To feel it. To know exactly how final it was. She chose this. She gave me someone else's children and expected me never to ask questions. She let me build a life on sand and then got mad when I noticed the ground shifting. I'm done. The first morning after they were gone, I woke up to silence. Not just the absence of noise, but a silence that felt thick, like it had substance. No cartoons humming from the living room. No little footsteps on the stairs. No Danielle's voice calling from the kitchen. Just the hum of the fridge and the creak of the floor when I stood up. I made coffee and sat alone at the table. No distractions. Just me, a steaming mug, and a new kind of empty. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel rage. What I felt was something colder, exhaustion, mostly. Like I'd finally dropped a weight I'd been carrying for years without knowing it. The anger had already passed through me. Now came the cleanup. The quiet stage. The part no one talks about after everything explodes. I cleaned the house obsessively those first few days. Washed sheets, boxed up toys, wiped every fingerprint from the windows. Not because I wanted to erase the memories, some of them, if I'm being honest, I wasn't ready to let go of, but because I needed control. I needed to do something that responded to the chaos with order. Cleaning made things make sense, if only for a while. People asked questions. My parents. Her sister, who, awkwardly, I no longer had any interest in talking to after that one night. I don't exactly regret, but also don't want to revisit. A few friends texted to ask if we were okay. I gave no details. Things didn't work out, was all I said. I didn't feel like defending myself or painting Danielle as the villain. I was too tired for the performance. Eventually, I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I went for long walks. I sat at the bar alone and didn't check my phone. I picked up books I'd left half-read on the shelf. I didn't know who I was without the identity of husband and father, but I was curious enough to find out. 3 months passed. It was slow at first, but the emptiness faded into something else. Stillness. Then clarity. I didn't need to fill the house with noise again. I just needed to hear myself think. I got a dog from a shelter. Small thing with big ears and a bark way louder than his size. I named him Milo. He's clingy and a little awkward, but loyal in a way that makes it hard to feel completely alone. That's around when I met Anna. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning strike. Just a conversation at the bookstore, where we both reached for the same copy of a travel memoir and awkwardly did that dance of no, you take it. She smiled like she'd had a hard year too. We talked. I bought the book. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes. Anna's different from Danielle in every way. Quieter. More thoughtful. She listens with her whole face, like she's absorbing every word, not just waiting for her turn to speak. We've only been seeing each other a few weeks, but there's an ease to it. No pretending. No pressure. Just two people trying to be honest with each other, even if we're both carrying scars. I told her everything by our third date. She didn't flinch. Didn't pity me. She just said, that must have been incredibly hard, and held my hand across the table. And maybe that's all I needed. Not a fix. Not a replacement. Just someone to see me and not turn away. I don't know what happens next. I'm not rushing into anything. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not stuck in the past. I'm not waking up to confusion or suspicion or carefully packaged lies. I'm waking up to myself. It's been almost a year now. If you had told me back then, on the day I opened that envelope, or the night I told Danielle to leave, that I'd be where I am now, I wouldn't have believed you. I couldn't have. Back then I was all raw nerves and disbelief. I was still replaying every scene in my head, trying to figure out how I missed it, where I went wrong, what kind of man gets cheated on for 10 years and doesn't see it coming. But now, I don't ask those questions anymore. Because I've come to accept that sometimes people lie with their whole lives. Sometimes they smile while they do it. I haven't spoken to Danielle since she left the house that day. Not a word. She tried. At first, constantly texts, voicemails, even a letter, which felt weirdly formal for a woman who once shared a toothbrush holder with me. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. I already knew everything I ever would. Any version of the story she could offer me wouldn't change the facts. And facts are what I've learned to live with now. Caleb and Lila, that's been the hardest part. Not the truth itself, but the distance. The sudden vacuum where the sounds of childhood used to be. I still think about them. Of course I do. I raised them. I held them when they were sick, taught Caleb how to ride a bike, rocked Lila to sleep on stormy nights. I was their dad, even if I wasn't their father. And for better or worse, that bond doesn't dissolve just because a piece of paper tells you it was built on a lie. But I had to make a choice, and I chose me. It took me a long time to understand that. For months, I felt like I was the one who broke something by walking away. That by shutting the door, I had turned my back on two kids who never asked for any of this. But the truth is, I didn't walk away from them. I walked away from her. From the lie she forced me to live inside. She chose what they would lose, not me. Anna's still around. We're taking things slow. No introductions, no big declarations. Just one day at a time. She's the kind of person who doesn't need to fix you, which is rare. She just sits beside you and listens. Some nights, we'll talk for hours. Other times, we'll sit in silence. And both feel equally full. There's no second guessing with her. No edge to the calm. My house is quieter now, but it feels like mine. I rebuilt the third bedroom into a small office. Took down the old family photos. Left a few up, though not out of sentiment, but because they're a part of the story. You don't need to hate the past to let it go. You just need to stop pretending it still holds you. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't always come with fire and drama. Sometimes it comes dressed in routine, in smiles and weekend plans and "I love you" texts. Sometimes, the worst kind of betrayal is the one that looks exactly like love until you hold it up to the light. But healing? Healing doesn't come all at once either. It comes quietly, in good coffee, in long walks, In a Sunday morning with no noise and no lies. In the steady beat of your own life returning to you. This wasn't the life I planned. But it's mine now. And I'm still standing. Thanks for reading.